Hello,
Hey,
hello.
Oop, there we go. Hey, everyone. I'm Will from Nifty Method, and we're back with Lindsay here talking about budgeting for marketing. How are you doing, Lindsay?
I'm good. I'm good. Budgeting is always one of those serious topics, especially this time of year where we're
Yeah,
getting closer to that portion where you need to make all of your choices about 2022. So, dust off your crystal ball because everything you thought about 2021 that was real is not now. So uncertain. So I'm excited and a little somber.
I tried to wear a brighter shirt for a less fun topic, but yeah, without further ado, why don't you give us a little introduction for those of the audience that didn't watch the previous one about yourself and kind of your background?
Sure. So my name's Lindsay Martin Bilbrey, and I am the CEO over here of Nifty Method, and excited to talk about the Marketing Orchard, which is one of our newest offerings from our agency that will help marketing, creative, and different things that you think to need to make your business grow affordable for those small business startups, associations, and nonprofits.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to jump right into things. I know everyone thinks about this this time of the year, like, oh my god, I have to make all my decisions for the next year if I want to stay on budget, and that's always a worry when you get into okay, do I need to hire a team? Do I need to start booking an agency? So what should people consider when they're budgeting for marketing?
Yeah. And it's funny, as you were talking through that and I said that, I was like, wait a second, that's big businesses, right? Budgeting, everybody has to have budgets in time for Q4 so they can be approved by the end of the year. But the small business owner, sometimes your cash flow is quarter to quarter, sometimes it's month to month, sometimes, bless your hearts, it's week to week. So, I think that budgeting element, whether you are a larger business that's not really a big business yet, but you're a larger business and you've got enough roadway that you're planning out into next year, or you're smaller and you're just trying to get it out and get it going. Some of the things that are really helpful to keep in mind as you start the budgeting adventure is that it's just a budget, which sounds kind of crazy, right? But a budget, like everything else in life, is a spreadsheet that can be adapted. It can be updated. It is going to have other things that influence and adapt for it, because God laughs when man plans, or women plan, anyone plans. And if you don't believe in the higher power, then someone's laughing when you go, this is absolutely something that's going to happen tomorrow, especially if you've been living through, as a business owner, as a nonprofit, association, a startup, in this last year and a half. I don't know that any of us could have predicted many of the twists and turns we found ourselves. I was on the phone with a client of ours last Friday night. There's this big trade show that's coming up. They've invested a significant amount of money in different elements, from a budgeting perspective. They've budgeted for revenue to come from this trade show. They've budgeted for the marketing dollars they're using for sponsorship and for the ads they've bought. And now there are all of these questions about what the fall marketing campaigns are going to look like. The digital world, there's a lot of elements where there's just a little bit more certainty because the internet, please, isn't going anywhere, right? But now these places where you're like, I'm going to do this, but I have to now do that, it just feels like the other shoe's going to drop. So let's hit some high points of ways that you can be successful with your budgeting without worrying about it. Number one is it's just a plan, right? And like all good plans in life, you are an owner or a director or a person who has oversight over money. A plan needs a plan B and a C and a D. There are 26 letters in the alphabet. And then if you run out of letters, do as the weathermen do and create alternative names for them. I mean, sometimes it happens. We went through several iterations last year with our budget. The second one is to remember that sometimes it's okay to take a risk and a chance. But if the chance or the risk doesn't pay off, you better be out there figuring out an alternative. We call it scenario planning here at Nifty Method. It's actually baked in to the way that we look at what people traditionally call forecasting. Forecasting implies a linear approach to your budgeting or to your revenue regeneration, right? Scenario planning is kind of like crisis management planning. we put sticky notes of all the different scenarios in which we could accomplish things. And we iterate from there, and we come up with different trap doors so that if one scenario doesn't work quite as well as we hoped, there's another scenario to come after. Which, unlike that, I mean, if you've been watching Loki at all with the variant of the timeline, but linear timeline can get really nasty really quick. And then all of a sudden, the TVA is going to come in and prune you. Scenario plan leaves you in a much more solid approach. The final one that we really like to adapt for is hive mind this. Many times we approach budgeting in a silo. These things are only going to work if I have these people here. We only need the decision makers. And sometimes, friends, you are way too close to it. And sometimes you've got PTSD because last year sucked and this year hasn't necessarily been that much better, depending on what industry you're in. There's been rises, but there's been falls. And speaking of rises, when you plan with a team that's got your back and is holding their hand as you jump off the cliff together, that rising tide lifts all of your boats. It also opens doors and puts a little sunlight into all of the projects that you could have inside your business. And maybe you discover a new line of money or a way to cut costs that doesn't necessarily have you cutting staff or cutting quality. So really thinking about those three options of, it's okay to have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. It's okay to do it in different scenarios and not just have it in a straight line of, oh gosh, if this doesn't work, where do we go? And it's okay to do it as a team activity so that you have places to recuperate from and someone's hand to hold when you're making big choices that have sometimes scary outcomes.
Definitely. And right, over and over again, we're talking about these big decisions that small businesses and startups are having to make, right? When you're expanding, we talk about, right, do you hire a team or do you take on an agency? And when do you think that, one or the other is more optimal?
So I think, again, like we talked about last time, it depends. But where the budgeting is concerned, this is sometimes where it can really behoove you to hire an agency. And I'm going to have a shameless plug here for Nifty because it's not really Marketing Orchard's solid point. Although we do website audits, we do marketing audits, and all an audit is having a third party come out and go, this is working, this isn't working, here's some options, right? So it gives you a lower place to come in, pay us $1,200, and you've got an objective third party that comes in and gives you a plan. But if you find that it's a much larger project, that's when you really do need to work with a larger agency because it's not a cut and dried approach. An audit is only going to point out the things that are and aren't working. It's very black and white. It's not the qualitative consultative approach where if we talk to your customers, if we talk to your vendors, if we talk to you, your staff, that you really have that. And this is one of those, that last point I made earlier from the 3 things you can do when you're budgeting. Sometimes the consultant is a good person to hold your hand. We work with a couple of clients who, that's one of the only reasons we work with them. They just need an objective expert partner to come in and kind of help them guide the ship. Because sometimes it's really, really murky out there. And some of the scenarios in front of you are really, really scary. So why not have somebody who is just going to help you get around the big iceberg, and then you don't need us anymore, right? We've helped you take that next step forward, and you can navigate this going forward. So I think those are the places. For the second portion of that, as you're planning your budget and you're finding you are having to cut staff or you are having to pull things back, you always want the quality experience of your customers to stay at the front of the line. So it's a place where the Marketing Orchard or a service similar to ours can help you go in and replace some of that manpower. It's expensive to have people help you support for certain things like marketing and sales because it really is something that requires an expert to come in and draw a picture, build a website, write great copy, figure out how this needs to go there so people will click on you, get on the first page of Google. Like these are things just like you are an expert in the business that you run. Sometimes you can't afford the human to be on staff full time. Like you could afford maybe the basics, but payroll tax, benefits, all the stuff that goes along with having those people, it's just not there right now. So break it down into bite-sized chunks and maybe budget that you can do it at the end of the year or in the next quarter, and then use a service like ours or something similar to help move it in so that you never have to stop that demand generation that lead, that brand application, that really great website you want to launch, but you're so close and you just haven't got it done yet. That's where our service, where you go, this product, that outcome, this deadline, and we're there. That's what you need to look for, are what is the one step I can take right now, rather than scaring yourself with all of these things with what do I need, and the thing in front of me is so big to overcome.
Yeah, definitely. We talk about being, a little bit more cost effective over hiring a full team, and going over and over again, basically, on how you need to like dip your toe in the water before you go all in. So what is the most cost effective way of working with an agency? Is it doing a retainer? Is it like working on a project by project basis?
Well, let's break it down a little bit and think about probably the most common reasons that a small business owner like yourself or a startup would hire, right? Let's use websites. I was reading something on the statistics where it said something like 80% of all consumers are going to check out a website before they contact you in any way, shape, or form. Of those 80%, nearly 90% of them are looking at you on their mobile devices. Now, you might have a website that's built, though a startling statistic also that we unearthed is nearly 70%. And this was a poll taken last year as everyone was kind of going, oh gosh, they can't come to the shop, right? Nearly 70% of small businesses don't have a website, which is crazy. That means you're letting Facebook or LinkedIn or the local newspaper own your IP, your intellectual property, right? The copy that's written about you, the ability to have the hosting and your whole identity go offline. You've put that in the hands of someone else. And I don't know about you, but that terrifies me. So, a website project, you don't need a retainer necessarily. You need a project person, a project company, an agency, a freelancer to come in and do that and help you not be one of those 70% who are going to have a non-existent website, nor not have one that's not performing as optimally as it needs to be from a mobile perspective. Because that little device, y'all, it's not going away. Like, people are going to be using it and using it powerfully. Now, ongoing marketing, let's talk about social media. That's something where you could use a service like ours to create some templates, because you've got a plan, you've got people who can make that plan happen. Use this for a project. You need help building a steady cadence around your social media. You need someone to go, what is the good stuff? Where's the actual juice inside the orange we've got? That's where you have a retainer. And the only reason we say a retainer is going to be a good fit is because it helps you spread your costs out, because it helps the agency spread its cost out. We can predict the scenario that y'all are going to pay your bills on time, so we can pay our staff on time, right? If you can't commit to that, do a project and then get there step by step. And then ultimately you can decide, is it more expensive or less expensive for me to hire people to do this, or to keep the team I have in place? Because that's the final thing to think about, it is the value add. People go, it is so expensive to work with an agency. Yeah, but one person is one person, and they're wearing a lot of hats. When you work with an agency, and this is almost any agency out there, you are getting a team of at least 4 people. There is a strategist who's checking in. There's a project manager who's making sure it's taking on, time. There's a person who's actually doing the work. And then there's an account manager whose life is dedicated to making sure your stuff is where it needs to be. So think about that. Like, when you're like, it's expensive. Yeah, it is, because you've got 4 people doing one thing. And that's to help your business succeed. That kind of changes it. Levi, our COO, has been putting together a blog post about the calculator. There's several out there on the internet. So think about that. But, that's a big step for many small businesses and startups. If you're not ready for that agency experience, you don't need that much. You just need a website. You just need a white paper. You just need some swag. That's where the Marketing Orchard can fill in, or a freelancer or someone else.
Definitely. We're talking about the Marketing Orchard overall today in this conversation. So how does the Marketing Orchard differ from like a traditional marketing agency?
So it's an e-commerce version of a marketing agency. Nifty is a straight agency, right? We've got account teams that come and help you with your things. This is an e-commerce experience, my friends. You go in, you go, I need a logo. You click the button, you fill out the creative brief, and then within 72 hours, you have a logo. You have versions that are in a high quality approach into it. Same thing for swag, trade show booths, virtual trade show booths. You find the thing you need, you tell them what you want it to be, you talk to your designer via chat, and then it's done. You don't have to guess, you don't have to bid, you don't have to do any of that. All of it is set up. And we like that approach for several reasons. A, it's easy to figure out what it is. B, we don't hide pricing. Like, the thing costs this. You want to go and find something that's going to be less money, go and spend your time, which is also money, and find a different option, right? That's, the two biggest elements is right now, like this. Many of us need things right now, like this. This is the closest approximation for design services, creative services for this type of product that we can offer. And we know, we've been it. I mean, I worked in nonprofits for many years as a staffer before I went out on my own and started an agency. And we wanted to just help you find a solution, because sometimes you don't want to mess with a messy contractor or trainer. You just need that thing right now, like you want it.
Yeah, and we keep hitting this note at the end of every conversation, right? Marketing Orchard, we set it up uniquely for small businesses. Is there anything you had in mind when setting up the Marketing Orchard where you're like, small businesses need that or this, when you were thinking like from the Nifty Method side, we couldn't help them in that way?
So a lot of it had to do with cost, bringing us back to our topic of budgeting. I remember when I was the program director at the Nonprofit Technology Network, in many ways, we operated like a small business. We had a shoestring budget, and every quarter I would look at what I was doing and figure out ways to make it happen. I learned how to do a lot on my own. And that's very time consuming, and it's not as good a quality. Like, it's a company joke of the fact that like Lindsay should be nowhere near Illustrator. Lindsay really shouldn't be anywhere inside Adobe products except for like iStock, if only to point and say that one. And that's something that many of our clients that we were finding at the Nifty Method perspective, they wanted agency quality work. They wanted expert work. And if I should, say that we're experts there at Nifty, they wanted that level, and they just couldn't afford it. We've had lots of contracts where they just weren't able to make it work, and that was the only reason they chose a different option. And I didn't want that to happen. And granted, you can always choose a different option. You've got lots of choices, right? And that's why we're pretty transparent about this. Like, the money is there. And if you tell us really that's what you want, then we're coming in. And that's one of the biggest differentiators between working with a Nifty Method and the Marketing Orchard. But we'll tell you a secret. You're still working with Nifty. It's just the lower priced version. The ones that work with us at the Nifty Method agency are slightly larger brands, or brands that are businesses, startups, small, whatever you are, right? They're organizations like yours that have needs that don't easily fit into a box. The Orchard is designed for people who know what they want, for brands that are able to turn that into something that can be put into a written format and move it on. Many of the clients, sometimes when you're in the searching phase, that's why we recommend working with a larger agency partner, because they have more time to help you do it. And that's better money spent and budgeted for, because we guide you on the iterative process of figuring out what if, why not, right? Versus going, yeah, Comic Sans as a font choice is going to be the best long-term decision you've ever made. And then everyone will maybe point and laugh at your sign, which we don't want that for you, right? We want it done right. We want it done well. We want you to have something you're going to be proud of. So I think that's the biggest piece as you're budgeting for small businesses, budgeting for startups, nonprofits. Think about, what can I afford right now? What can I afford that's going to be best for my business in the long term? And folks, at this point in time, long term is like 6 months in the future, right? In the long term. And what's the best for me in the short term? And sometimes we get tunnel vision when we're budgeting because we're worried about cash flow. And so we start to make choices, and we make them as small as possible with nothing to be able to slice off of. That's a place where, when you find yourself in that situation as you're putting a budgeting spreadsheet together, you could put a Nifty in, or you could put an Orchard in and figure out, and then mix and match. You could have 4 different plans, right? One with the Orchard as an option, one with staff, one with Nifty, one with someone else entirely, and figure out which one of those scenarios makes the most sense when you get to August, when you get to September, when you get to October. And that's the beauty of the budgeting process, is that it's just a plan. like figure it out and use your audit trail if you need to go back and do something differently.
Definitely. And that's kind of all we had for questions today. I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in with us again. We're going to have more episodes in the future. We hope to see you there. Thank you again to Lindsay for coming on and talking to us for a little bit. And we also have a brand startup package at the Marketing Orchard. If you guys want to go check that out and work with us, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you again for tuning in.
Yeah, check us out at marketingorchard.com. We'll talk to you soon.